Hi, good evening. I'm Dr. Levern Murphy. I'm the chairman of Black Coffee Political Alliance, and I want to talk about something that is a major issue for our community, particularly as it relates to the funding of public education. As you know, the responsibility for public education lies with the state, and the state has the authority to regulate how that functions and how that works. We have a funding formula in our state where the funding for public education comes from property tax assessments. And so what happens is that the state has organized school districts across the state, and each school district and the properties that reside within it are assessed a tax rate based on its value. And the taxes collected from those property taxes go into a fund to pay for public education in that school district. And so the problem that we have in Black Coffee with that formula is that it is a race-based formula, it is a class-based formula, and it disproportionately distributes public funds across districts, and it causes us an extreme disadvantage for some in the state and an extreme advantage for others. And let me explain what I mean by that. In the property tax assessment, we have some school districts that have upwards of $30,000 to spend per student on their public education. On the other end, we have some school districts that can only afford around $6,000 or $7,000 per student. Now, given that disproportionate allocation of public funds, one would not reasonably expect that if you have the disadvantage of attending a public school in a district that can only afford to spend $7,000 per student versus a district that can spend almost $30,000, would you expect the students coming out of the lower assessed tax be able to get the quality of education that those kids coming out of the higher tax assessment would get? Certainly not. And so what we think in Black Coffee would be a better formula, we could continue to use property taxes as a way of funding public education. But we believe that all taxes, regardless of what district they may be collected from, should be deposited in a common fund and then distributed equitably across the state. And so if we were to do it that way, then we would remove the funding disadvantage for poor communities and poor students. And therefore we would have an educational balance in our formula that would give everybody an equal chance to get a quality education because they are not disadvantaged by this disparity in the amount of cash or the amount of money that is spent on public education for any student. And so we're going to be pushing hard in Black Coffee and ask our legislators and public officials to change the present funding formula that has served as a historical disadvantage for minority and poor communities, because it's simply not a fair nor equitable funding formula. So I just want to repeat, what we need to do is change this formula and not leave all of the money collected for taxes in the more affluent areas, which gives them a significant advantage in having the necessary resources to educate the students in their district. We want all of the taxes collected from property taxes throughout the state to be deposited in a common fund and then have all of those funds distributed equally across all school districts. And now we would bring equity into the public school funding formula. Thank you for listening.